70 snow here. So now I'm going to go ahead and play our voicemail from Ashton, and you can listen in on this.
Hey, it's Ashton. I just wanted to say that I am so sorry that I can't be on tonight. I was in Tennessee with family, and the weather caused a little bit of an issue getting back. A 4.5-hour trip turned into about 7.5. So not able to get back in time, but I wanted to call and say best of luck on a great show. And Mark, I hope you can hold it down for me.
Yes, and with that is a good introduction for Mark Small. He is representing the left, and as he said to me, he says, I'm further left than the left. So I'll let him introduce himself, tell a little bit about himself. Go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, John. I'm Mark Small. I'm a lawyer in Broad Ripple. That's where I have my office, mainly do appeals. I'm a lifelong Hoosier, except for about 2 years living in Chicago. And I lived 7 blocks south of Wrigley Field, which is the center of the baseball universe. And I'm good for the rest of my life on baseball because we won the series in 16. You asked for fun facts about, if I could come up with a fun fact, I was never in witness protection, no matter what anybody says. So.
You were Mark Large back then. So
not even say anything.
Yeah. So, and this has been a disgrace to Mark, and I called him at about 4:30 this afternoon because we were really hoping Ashton would get back, but this is a great surprise that we're having him on, and I think this will be a good, lively debate. So let's jump right into our first topic. Tonight, our local topic is going to be teacher vaccinations and opening schools. And then the second portion of our program is going to be legalized drugs or decriminalization of drugs. So we're going to talk about that. And we may have a special guest involved in this, and it's going to be a good discussion. So let's get to the first part of this. I'm going to ask you a question. Let's start with Jacob tonight, since he's our normal guy. No, wait, we should start with our guest. Our guest should be first, right, Jacob? Don't you think so?
I agree.
And I would defer. I mean, if we're doing a coin toss, I'll defer.
Yeah, it's lawyer talk already. We have 35 seconds into the show. We already got lawyer speak. So what do you think about teachers being considered first responders and getting into the line quicker than, say, the average citizen? As far as what do you think about that? Do you think that's something that's good, bad, or otherwise?
I think that you have to look at what the values are and what those individuals are doing for the community and for the public. And that's one thing that we haven't had as a national policy towards all of this. This should be like we're dealing with a war. It's a pandemic. So we should have had a federal policy. But if you're dealing with people that are, I know lawyers who tried to say that they were essential services, and in some areas of law they could be, but in most, I don't think so. But if you're dealing with teachers that are there with kids and they're there every day and the schools are open, I think that they should have a higher priority than the average citizen. I became eligible when they came down to my age, young as I am, and I wasn't going to jump ahead of anybody, but I wasn't going to delay either because I think it's important to do that. But I think they should be in there, but we have to have an overall policy that approaches it rationally.
Okay, and Jacob, let me put a little bit of a caveat on this. Sure. So I had seen on a post that special needs teachers were able to jump the line because they had to deal with bodily fluids because of their business. So not only do we have teachers in this line, but certain teachers in that line. What does that change your opinion about any of this, or what do you feel about that?
Well, I would say overall, I think, when we're talking about teacher vaccination, we have to kind of look at the overall approach to the pandemic in its entirety. I think, quite frankly, the model that Indiana should be looking at is the model of Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, not only in regards to opening and closing businesses, which I feel very strongly about, but actually in regards to vaccinations as well. if we look at the science, because we're always being told to follow the science, I would say that the science makes it very clear that the people that are most susceptible to this are people in the elderly demographic, people ages 65 plus. Usually that's where over 90% of the deaths have occurred from COVID-19, and a lot of times where more severe illnesses also occur. So I am definitely not opposed to having teachers jump the line if they meet that category. But I think like a young intern, say, young teacher just getting started out, like 25-year-old gal right out of college or something, she or he is not at a higher risk than somebody over age 65. So I really think that we should be focusing on the elderly rather than just focusing on just prioritizing teachers, because yes, they are in a environment with more people, yes, but there's also been other studies that have proven that transmission in the classroom is very comparable with the rest of the population. This is coming from the CDC. Actually, President Biden's CDC has verified this. And that usually, like I said, it's not as deadly for people in that demographic, in the younger demographic. So to summarize, if you're an elderly teacher, yes, you should be at the front of the line. But by virtue of just being a teacher, I don't think that should make you go to the front of the line especially before elderly people that are the most in need of the vaccine.
Okay, so and here's something I read about extra vaccines. So apparently in Evansville and Vincennes, teachers are able to jump in if they have extra vaccines that aren't being used. So I don't know how that works. I don't know how the vaccines are being distributed over the whole state, but it sounds like there's extra in Vincennes and Evansville. So what do you think about, I guess the distribution? And right now, I think we're at age 60 is our cutoff in a lot of areas. If you're 60 and over, you can get that. And say you're a 21-year-old teacher up in Lake County. Do you think that you have much of a risk of getting COVID, or what would be your mindset since you're 21? Lee, give us old guys a little perspective on that.
Well, once again, following the science behind this disease, it seems like it's undeniable that the majority of people that are at severe risk from COVID-19, as with a lot of other illnesses, are the immunocompromised and elderly people. So, I mean, me personally, at my age, I don't even feel like I really even need a vaccine. I suspect that I had COVID previously. I think I got it at a time when there was very low testing, so I wasn't able to go get tested for it, and I did perfectly fine. No real long-term effects of it. I think that getting on the topic of vaccines, I always think it should be a choice. I think people should be able to make up their minds whether they feel like they need a vaccine or not. But I think certainly the people that definitely need the vaccine from a more scientific perspective are people in the elderly demographic. I think there's very, very little need for somebody in the younger demographic to need a COVID vaccine when they're at such a low risk.
So, Mark, as far as let's go with this, since you have the attorney background, about, say you're a teacher and you don't want to go back for this, but your school board or superintendent may say, you know what, you can either do this or have a problem. What's your perspective on that?
Well, first of all, I probably would move to a different state. I wouldn't want to be in Florida. Secondly, it's ignoring the science, because the latest variants that are coming out, as far as the variations of the coronavirus, are starting in Britain. They're hitting younger people. The South African variant is hitting younger people. So they're adapting. It's called evolution. I know that that's something people don't necessarily like to think about in terms of science, but it's a daily thing. So if I were in that situation as a teacher, I would say, no, I really, really, really need my paycheck, but I really want to live too. But when Jacob was talking about what DeSantis has done, I think what DeSantis has done has been fantastic. If you're in any kind of undertaking or cremation services, DeSantis is a great guy. If you want to get land cheap because you're waiting for estate sales, beautiful. Otherwise, he's done a really bad job. We should have a nationwide policy, because this is a nationwide problem.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the levity, because sometimes we really just laughing is all we can do about things. But
What levity?
But unfortunately, a lot of people have lost their sense of humor about a lot of different things. And, we do have to be mindful of our, of people. But I guess one of the questions that comes to my mind is schools being open. How and in the chat, if there's people watching here, which it looks like there's a few people watching, let me know if your school's open, how long it's been open, and what's been happening. Mark, how's your school? I know you're still in the 9th grade or whatever. No, I'm just kidding. Jacob, you're like closer to school age, and what's your school situation up there? And I will get to you about.
Well, I am still in school. I'm a college student. For Purdue right now, it's mostly virtual, which I don't really have much of an issue with because I'm self-employed. So actually having virtual classes is very convenient for me. And I did a lot of virtual classes pre-COVID anyway. I will say in regards to schools being open, this is something Governor DeSantis has really displayed too. I was just reading a report that Florida actually had lower transmission of virus and actually lower death from the virus among children than a lot of other states that were much more stricter with school policies. So I certainly think schools can be open safely. Like I said, this is a bipartisan issue. Even Mayor Lightfoot up here in Chicago has been pushing to open schools up. Kind of having conflict with the teachers unions about that. Biden's own CDC is saying that schools should be open. And in regards to Mark's point about Governor DeSantis, I think really the governor he should be referring to in terms of with undertakers and other people involved in the death industry should be Governor Cuomo, or even somebody like Governor Pritzker or Governor Whitmer, because Florida actually is, I believe, 26th or 27th in the nation for mortality, and they've had a lot less deaths in the higher risk categories than states like New York and Illinois and Michigan. So really, considering that Florida has one of the heaviest elderly populations in the country, I think Governor DeSantis has done a wonderful job in regards to shielding the elderly, especially with their vaccine rollout. They've been vaccinating more seniors than a lot of states have. So I would say overall, I think Florida is a great model for opening schools, for protecting our vulnerable, and for keeping society functioning.
Wow, Mark. This is Ashton gets it going a little less than this. So I think you drew first blood picking on DeSantis, because it looks like in the chat there's a couple of fans for DeSantis in there. So what say you?
I was talking to a friend of mine in Florida this afternoon. I wasn't in Florida. He was. But he is number 31,987 in his county in the lottery waiting to get a vaccine. He could have gone to, I think it was Walton County. He's down near Sarasota. Walton County is up in the Panhandle. And he was talking to one of the people in the rollout, and he's saying, well, that's kind of like an 8-hour drive. Is there any way you could coordinate? And they said, agree with you, but no, not really. So that's one instance in which I think we've got a bad example in Florida. I'd have to look at those stats, Jacob. But from my understanding, especially when they were opening up the bars, and John can tell you, I like going to bars generally. Late afternoon, watching a football game, something like that. But I think that when you're talking about transmission of a virus that is mutating, and this one is a really interesting mutation, and we're not talking about it in terms of the context of climate change, which actually this is an example because we have more viruses. And not to throw things into too much of a spin, but there's a new Ebola outbreak that was just announced in Africa. And that's one that, COVID's bad enough, but man, Ebola would be, that's where you're like bleeding out your eyes, and it's been in a bunch of spy novels too. Don't take us in rabbit holes. We got going on one of those last week. We have some other things to get to today. The rabbits spread it too. Rabbits spread Ebola. A lot of people don't realize that.
Well, but I just want to.
Hold on, I got to put up the banner for this one. Hold on a second. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yes, I was just going to answer one point. The one thing I will say, though, Mark, in terms of with transmission of virus, just talking about it in a broader sense within schools and, like you said, within bars, an interesting comparison is when we had kind of the second spike here in December and January. California was very locked down. and Florida was very open. And what's really interesting, they have comparable populations. California's a little bit more than Florida. But what's interesting about it, Florida was 100% open, and they were seeing less cases per capita than the state of California that was locked down for basically 2 months. So that kind of questions the efficacy of these lockdowns. And I think that, I think certainly we need to take the disease very seriously, but we shouldn't be going with a strategy that's, really kind of unproven to work at best and possibly not really impacting the trajectory of the virus at all, because lockdowns have serious consequences. These schools being closed down. I mean, I saw some comments here. There were some people were mentioning that, their kids are really suffering not being in the school environment. Certainly a lot of people are suffering from not having their jobs because of lockdown. So I think Florida is a wonderful case example of a state being fully open and not really having a whole huge issue compared to a lot of lockdown states.
Yeah, and this.
Well, but if you look at lockdown nations, Korea and Israel had lockdowns. They've been very successful. They've kept the rates down. We have a situation where people come in and out. Again, I have to look at the numbers on Florida, but when you have, it's kind of quasi lockdown. You can't really depend upon the numbers from one state because other people are coming in and out of that state. And so if you look at countries like Korea, like Israel, I think Malaysia also, they have very low transmissions because they have had periods of complete lockdown.
Well, but once again, the issue though, Mark, with Israel, I mean, if their lockdown works so well, why are they on lockdown number 3, potentially going on number 4? If lockdowns were so effective, the first lockdown or even the second lockdown should have been able to wipe out transmission, but instead they just keep going back and forth. And then Israel hit almost 25% sustained unemployment rate for a while. And there's a lot of issues that come with that, as well as the violation on civil liberties. And, you got to take all those things into consideration as well. I mean, you can't just turn society on and off like it's like a light switch. These are people's lives you're talking about.
And I understand that, but also this is a virus that goes through waves, so it wouldn't be completely wiped out. The Spanish flu, it was called the Spanish flu, even though it started, I think, in Kansas, went through 3 distinct waves, and they had shutdowns in parts of the country. But it's just saying, well, we got to have the economy first. That's a great way to kill people. And we have almost 500,000 people killed in this country, more per capita than any other country. We're leading in the world in that, and we had the most asinine approach to it for months prior to January 20th, 2021.
Well, yeah, certainly Governor Cuomo did have a very asinine approach to it, among other governors, considering all the people that died in nursing homes, because we do have to focus on shielding the vulnerable, not on shielding the people that really have no risk. I mean, opening up schools, like President Biden's CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, said, there really is not a risk of transmission or, children really dying in schools from all of this. So certainly, yes, we have to take COVID seriously and maybe have shutdowns in certain respects, like, shutting down the vulnerable people, so suggesting to them not to leave their houses, or maybe limiting visitation to nursing homes and other old people, old people's homes or something like that. But just shutting down the entire economy, that leads to despair, that leads to people's lives being destroyed, livelihoods, massive poverty, supply chain shortages, repeated stimulus bills that only could possibly hike inflation in the future. So there's so many issues with lockdowns, and it's just really a strategy that's never been tried before. Yes, there were limited shutdowns for the Spanish flu, but it was mostly things like maybe movie theaters. It wasn't an entire economic shutdown like we've seen in these other countries.
I understand, but when you're looking at a country, where we didn't have any leadership prior to January 20th, 2021 on this, and we had somebody who could something nationwide, who had no supply chain set up, who gave his son-in-law responsibility for that. Absurd. You can point to things like Como screwed up in some ways, fine. We should have had a nationwide policy. The President of the United States should have been out front on it. If we had been invaded by a foreign power, we actually were. I guess it was Russia in 2016. But if we had somebody who had responded to a military situation by saying we're going to let the individual states handle it, I think in 1941 we would have had a bad problem in World War II. So I think when you look at what we should have had as a policy, we wouldn't have had to have those crackdowns on the economy, and we wouldn't have had nearly 500,000 people dead on Trump's watch.
Well,
okay. I'm not gonna let you answer that because I want to do one more question, and I see our guest is in the queue. So here's a question from Spiro Araklianos. Let's discuss the real benefits of the vaccine. I am hearing conflicting stories. So what about the efficacy of the vaccine? Let's hit that real quick, just a brief couple minutes, and then we'll get to our next guest and the next topic. And we'll go ahead and start with Mark.
I went first last time. Let Jacob.
Oh my gosh. It's just okay, Jacob, go first.
Okay. The efficacy of the Pfizer vaccine has been shown to be over 90%. There are variants that are coming out because of the mutation of the virus. They're very optimistic about how those variants or those mutations are going to be addressed by it. Overall, the vaccines are showing Pfizer is over 90% efficacy. I got my shot last week. It was very minor discomfort in the injection site area, but I'm optimistic.
So when do you go back for your second shot?
March 5th.
Okay. So, and Jacob, I look at this as a little bit like the flu shot because they pick a strain of the flu each year and they try to catch that strain that they think is going to be popular. But some years they miss it. What do you think about this? And this goes to Mark's point about the variants that are different in the little nuances of what this virus actually does. And as we know, we have people that have zero symptoms all the way to death. So I don't know how much that plays into a factor of things if we have those variants already here. There's a lot of unknown details about this. So what say you about the efficacy of the vaccine and that type of thing?
Well, like Mark said, basically the FDA stated the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccines are both about 95% effective according to their criteria. And I believe Johnson & Johnson is somewhere between 70 and 80%, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I mean, I think if people feel like they want to take the vaccine, I think they should certainly have access to it, especially the most vulnerable people should certainly have access to it. In regards to distribution, like I said before, it should be really prioritized for those that are the most vulnerable category. And in regards to these virus mutations, I think we're getting a lot of kind of, fear mongering again, just like how we had in the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not something we take seriously, but there has been a lot of fear in the media. And generally, if you read about, I'm not a scientist, but I'm saying, but generally when you read about virus variants, a lot of times they tend to mutate in a way that actually will make the virus weaker. It's still really up for debate with the UK variant, whether it is more deadly or not. There are some reports saying it is more deadly. There's some that are just saying it's more contagious. So we really have to kind of see how that plays out. I would say that we can't really start really talking about these variants until we see what kind of practical impact they actually have. It's still too much of an unknown. None of us really have the answer to it quite yet.
Yeah, and I think that's we're going to end it on that. I think that is the biggest problem of when you're doing research, having consistent data and your variables, independent and dependent variables. It's just a tricky deal when you have so much data collection trying to get it consistent. So with that, now we're going to go to our next topic, which is the decriminalization of drugs in Oregon. And, we have our own little bit of a marijuana push here in the state. So we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to introduce our guest, our first official guest on the Mouthwash show. I'm going to put up a picture here if I can get to it. There it is. And we will bring him on here in just a second. And there we have the famous Bill Levin. And
hi, Marky. Hi, Jacob.
Hi, William.
It is customary on our show to introduce yourself, say a little bit about yourself, and one fun fact that someone may not know about you. So go ahead, Bill.
Hi, I'm Bill Levin, and I love my wife. I'm fond of ice cream sandwiches. And I'm not into shoveling snow.
Did you have to do that today?
I didn't have to, but I did.
You did, yeah. Yeah, it's like staying in was a good policy today. So this is really sort of coincidental how this worked out. We had scheduled Bill to be a guest on this topic, and Ashton, our normal co-host, she got stuck coming back to Indiana, so she couldn't be on. So I called Mark around 4:30, and he said he would do this. And yeah, Mark, he's poking you right now on the screen. And this is very interesting because Bill is are you the pastor of the Church of Cannabis? What do you call
It's
yourself?
Grand Poobah.
He's the
Grand Poobah.
yeah.
Grand
And-
Poobah and Minister of Love of the First Church of Cannabis in beautiful Indianapolis, Indiana, the home of where love grows.
And I have been there. It is a lovely place. I got to tell bad dad jokes, and that was a great service. And what's very interesting is you got into a little trouble when you opened this cannabis church, right? And then we had an attorney. You had an attorney that represented you, which happens to be Mark Small. So you can't make this up. This has just come together in such a interesting way. So I'm going to go ahead and play Ashton's question or comment on this, and we're just going to get this started with with drugs. We're going to talk about drugs. So let me get this going here.
So
Are
I
you there?
know I can't be on the show to debate every point that I would like to debate, but there's one specifically that I wanted to call and leave a message in case Mark or Bill forgot to mention it in the debate about the legalization of drugs, specifically marijuana. It has a huge positive economic impact. If we look at Colorado when they legalized weed, back in 2016, they had a $66 million tax surplus from the taxation of marijuana. And they had something written into the state constitution that said if they had a surplus on a new bill and the legalization had just been passed, that they had to return that surplus to the citizens. So they had so much money that they made off taxing marijuana that they actually had to give every taxpayer $8 back on their paycheck. So when we look at the positives of legalizing marijuana, the economic impact is a huge one and could be a great thing for the economy.
Okay, did you hear that?
I got some of it. First off, Colorado has a different state constitution than Indiana. Indiana will not send you any money back. They will keep it in the general fund and tell you it disappeared.
Well, I guess, Bill, you're going to go first on that one. So, but that's why we're having you on the show, because I know this has been it's been an issue for you that you've been passionate about for quite some time. Yeah, it looks like you're having a hard time hearing.
Yeah, I am. I don't have earphones, so I'm doing this thing. So you can
Yeah.
look. If you see earwax in there, just pull it out.
Hey, this is not that kind of show. But so the question is monetization of legalizing drugs. And so we'll just start with that, with either taxation or what's your feelings on that? We'll go with, I think Mark went last time. Jacob, let's since you're going to probably be the conservative here on this comment, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I've got a very interesting perspective, I would say, when it comes to the drug issue. I think on a lot of conservative issues, I tend to kind of be a little bit more, I tend to have some libertarian viewpoints. But in regards to drugs, I kind of have a mixed viewpoint. So I am very libertarian in the respect of that I think it's a states' rights issue. I don't think there should be any federal troops or federal laws or federal statutes involved in marijuana crimes. Like there shouldn't be, or any kind of drug crimes. There shouldn't be federal troops coming and arresting you or anything like that, or Congress passing laws. I think they should all be left as a states' rights issue. So if Colorado wants to legalize it, but Indiana does not, I think that should be up to states' discretions. Now, with that being said, I personally am against the legalization of drugs because I do think that drugs can cause a net problem in society, because obviously it has addictive qualities to it depending on the drugs. Some are more addictive than others. And I think that generally when you have a society that is embracing of drugs and of the drug lifestyle, that it can lead to a lot of societal ills and societal problems. So, but once again, like I said, I wouldn't impose my viewpoint on somebody about it. I personally am against drug use, but if a state voted to legalize them, I would say that that's well within their rights to do.
Okay, Mark, this is a question for you about the cost of, I guess, enforcing the prohibition. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Okay. Certainly. I've been advocating the legalization of all drugs for about 50 years, literally. First of all, states do not have rights. States have powers. According to the Declaration of Independence, people have rights. They delegate powers to the state out of convenience. So states don't have rights. There was the largest loss of American human life in any conflict was fought over the notion of states having rights, states' rights lost. As far as not having the feds involved, that has a very specific impact because in Colorado, for example, people who sell marijuana at dispensaries legally cannot bank it because the banks are under federal regs. So you have people with a lot of cash, because that is a cash-heavy industry, not able to do anything with the cash. So that causes problems in terms of crime committed against them. As far as addiction rates, there have been several studies done that have established that addiction rates for population for anything are the same percentage, about 2%. People are going to get addicted. At the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, you had 2% of the people who are going to get addicted to things. Same thing now. Whether it's drugs that we have being used, gambling, sex, watching a TV show, whatever, those are just aspects of our physiology. The real cost comes not just we can get tax money, that's spiffy, but the real cost comes in when you're talking about paying prisons, and prisons are they have a priority. They have an incentive to put people into prisons because the contract that they have, for example, GEO has with Indiana, requires that Indiana provide 90% occupancy of that prison, or else Indiana pays a penalty. That means you're encouraging people to be thrown into prison. Overall, prisons do a very bad job of any type of rehabilitation of people that are going in there. So that's bad. We're spending a lot of money on the prisons. And then the big impact of people getting out, if they have criminal convictions, even for misdemeanors, that can screw them up getting scholarships, getting jobs, being able to function within society. So across the board, it's been a failure. The war on drugs was over in the early 80s. I was at a celebration for that. It was called a Grateful Dead concert. And it just, the war on drugs has not worked. Portugal's had legal drugs for 20 years. They had the lowest addiction rates of any place in Europe. They make us look silly on that. So we should just go ahead and legalize them.
Okay, before Bill, I want you to weigh on this. I see you were agreeing quite a bit with Mark's comment there, but here's some trivia for the audience. Which president started the war on drugs and what year was it?
1969, Richard Nixon.
Oh, Bill, you were so close. It was 1971. 1971, Richard Nixon. Everybody thinks that.
I knew it was Richard.
Well, I think a lot of people think it was Nancy Reagan. I mean, because that's and Mark, I hate to tell you that it didn't. The war on drugs didn't end in 81.
First off,
go ahead, Bill. Your turn.
Drugs are all legal in North America. Who controls them is, it's like a lottery. You got the Purdue family, the biggest criminals in North America. They got more people hooked on opiates than any other single family in world history. Okay? These are the biggest criminals. They bought themselves royalty papers so they can be royals.
Yeah, and they had some issues on with the lawsuits, did they not? Did Purdue family, did they not have some lawsuits with some of the opioid addicted people? Weren't they open to some of those?
Yeah, I mean, they had tons of lawsuits, but all their money, it went off to Switzerland and went off to the Caymans. They're completely protected. They're royalty. They'll never see a day in jail.
Wow.
They're responsible for more deaths in North America than really anybody else. They're mass murderers. They taught doctors on how to open pill mill centers and showed them the loopholes so junkies can go from pill mill to pill mill to pill mill, accumulating as many drugs as they wanted to.
Yeah, and
there were caravan and busloads of people who would visit pill mill after pill mill after pill mill every day down in the South. It was a straight up drug ring, but it was all legal.
Yeah. And I'm going to let Jacob jump in here and add to this this question of the legality and who benefits. And I think that's got to be concerning to whomever is for or against legalization or decriminalization. Is follow the money, right?
No, certainly. To clarify one point, though, that I didn't touch on earlier, right before I go into that, is Mark raised a very good point about prosecution of drug crimes. I certainly do believe that the penalties we've had for drug users have been way too harsh. I do want to make that very clear. The kind of penalties that I feel more like focusing on are people that push drugs and that take advantage of people that are addicted and use it as a means to profit. An analogy I would give is actually an old movie from the 1950s, Frank Sinatra movie, The Man with the Golden Arm, where you had Frank Sinatra was a heroin addict in that movie, and he was constantly being manipulated by his pusher to be buying more drugs. So I think that really drug dealers should be prosecuted more than drug users. In regards to profitability and stuff, yes, certainly. Big pharma companies do profit off of opioids, as Bill was saying, and I think that's a major issue. I think that really legal drugs can be just as much of a problem as illegal drugs because opioids, legal or illegal, are addictive. It doesn't matter whether you're taking heroin or whether you're taking an over-the-counter medication from your doctor. It's something that just needs to be dealt with. And I think the crux of this problem is not so much throwing people in jail, fining people, changing laws, this kind of stuff. I think what we need to do is we need to really get back to an approach of teaching people in society about the importance of not being addicted to drugs. I think the whole war on drugs, just say no kind of program, that hasn't worked effectively. But we do, as a society, need to instill the values that there's more to life than just simply just getting high on some sort of drug all the time. That's not the sign of a productive society. In regards to answer your direct question about, the costs, certainly there can be some tax benefits from legalizing things. I don't deny that. But I think that the societal problems outweigh necessarily the tax implications of it. Always an analogy I like to draw to in terms of like a society that was really inundated with drug use is late 19th century China during the opium crisis. You had opioids were just widespread, and there was such widespread addiction in China, and that led to a society that was very easily conquered and subdued by the British and by other Western powers. So in summary, like I said, the debate for me is not so much over just drug legalization, but the problems with drug use. That I really think that a society that has widespread drug use and drug addiction is a society that is really destined for failure in a lot of ways, unfortunately.
Yeah, and a question or actually a comment for Bill, as we serve our homeless friends on the streets and that live in tents and different areas. What's your take on the opioid use in that community? Fill some of our viewers in that may not understand that, or give them a snapshot of what that looks like.
When you live out in the street, or when you live anywhere, you want to feel good about yourself. You want to feel good about others. Doctors get a lot of these people on pills. There's a lot of heroin out there. The biggest culprit of all is methadone. Methadone is running about $1,000 a pound now. Okay. Cocaine and heroin are still 20,000 a kilo. But when you get down to, you could pick up a pound of methadone for $2,000. That's ridiculous. And people will take this to stay awake. And then you have the added trouble of paranoia and violence because of the paranoia. So the worst drug out there now by far is meth. Heroin comes in close, but everybody you talk to who is on heroin started with doctor prescription pills. They didn't just say, oh, let's do heroin. They were taking oxycodone. And all of a sudden, poof, the oxys are gone. Doctors won't prescribe it anymore. Oh, well, shit, I'll get some heroin.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. And when we do see that with folks that live out, they want to get rid of their problems. And sometimes it's from that has ruined their situations. And I've seen some really sad situations that shouldn't be that way. So let me ask Mark, from a legal standpoint of the decriminalization and how and what the prisons look like, and expound on. I know you touched earlier on when somebody gets pinched for drugs when they come out and they have that felony. Give us a little bit more about what that looks like from, say, a felon that's coming out that has been in prison for either selling drugs or from that side of things. Because I know you've represented some folks that have been in some situations. So give us a snapshot.
They're going to come out. If they're coming out of DOC, then they'll do a transition period, but they also have to go through probation, and they have to do urine screens. And that means they're part of the system. They're always going to be part of the system. When they apply for a job, have you ever been convicted? Yeah, they've got to answer yes. Now, if they go 5 years, if it's a misdemeanor, I think it's 5 years, they can get that record expunged. But the expungement statute in Indiana has so many holes in it. It's a Swiss cheese, not bad cheese, not good for politics. And it's not even teaching people about not being addictive. Some people are going to be prone to addiction, others are not. And when Jacob's point just a couple of minutes ago about the late 19th century in China, the Chinese were trying to stop the opium trade. There were wars fought. They were called the Opium Wars. European powers had a hold on that trade. They wanted to make sure that people continued to use the opium there without any restrictions or any controls from the government. So it was two extremes there. The government wanted to stop it completely. Colonial powers wanted it to go on through. When Zhou Enlai was talking to Henry Kissinger about ending the Vietnam War, and Kissinger was talking about American boys coming home addicted to heroin, then Zhou Enlai said, well, imagine all the Chinese boys who were addicted to opium. We don't have any kind of sympathy for you. So and it's like a glass of wine after dinner. What, you're going to make it illegal? We did that prohibition, alcohol. Didn't work. You're making illegal a vice. There are problems with it. There's alcoholism, people losing jobs, people going out and driving. Those are things that you address, not by putting people in prison just for the use of it, but you recognize that's something that people do. Like Carlton said in Godfather 1, somebody wants to go gambling. They want to see a girl. We can do that. We can handle that. But this drug trade, I don't know. Well, Beto was wrong about it. And so we've got to realize you legalize it. That means they know the percentage of pure heroin. They know the impurities in it. We have a control on it. And this is the bottom line. When was the last time you heard anybody being busted for moonshiners? It doesn't happen. They're no longer in business. There might be some in certain pockets of Tennessee and Arkansas, but not that many. And people, Ashton's pointing out, people are afraid of seeking treatment because they might be arrested. They don't want to go in and say, I've got a problem with drugs. One, they can get arrested. Two, that can go on their record because three, under certain circumstances, a physician has an obligation to disclose an ongoing illegal behavior.
Okay, here's a question before you go, Jacob, and I'll let you talk about that, and then I'm going to parlay this next question. As a psychologist, I've helped addicted people try to get in programs, and sometimes these people have washed out of 2, 3, and up to 6 different programs, and the intake of some of these programs have gotten to the point where they're so difficult and so expensive. I mean, I know several people that have spent tons of money to get help and then it hasn't worked. So I know you touched on education, and Ashton did agree with you, which she's not even on the show and she's agreeing with you. That's not supposed to happen, about education and getting people aware of this situation. But what would be a solution for these overwhelmed treatment centers, the cost of them? What do you have anything that you could share that with us that might be effective?
Well, first of all, I do want to say about Ashton's comment that you put up on the screen earlier, that a lot of people are scared to go and get treatment to begin with because they're scared of prosecution. I do agree with Ashton and Mark and Bill on this, that there does need to be reform to our laws. I'm not saying for 1 second that what we have been doing for the last 30 to 40, 50, actually going on 50 years, has been completely effective. Certainly, I think the federal laws should be done away with and should be brought to the state level. And I really think that if any criminal penalties are involved with drug usage, it should not be on drug users, but rather on drug pushers. So if somebody genuinely is struggling with a cocaine or heroin or a meth addiction, and they want to get treatment for that, they should not feel scared to go for treatment. We should definitely have a system where people feel comfortable getting help. Now, in regards to the cost of these type of facilities, I would certainly say that you could kind of do a public-private partnership with this. I think a lot of churches, for example, and other religious organizations, synagogues, mosques, be they whatever they are, I think a lot of them see drug use as an immoral thing in their belief structure and their theological precepts. So I think you could partner up with churches and other non-for-profit institutions that feel this way. It doesn't all necessarily need to come from the government, nor should it come from the government, because I'm a small government type guy, and I think things are done a lot better on the local community level. The one issue that I have whenever we're talking about legalization of drugs is, regardless of what your opinion is one way or the other with legalization, is I think we need to come to the conclusion that drugs are not a good in society and they should be classified as a vice. We shouldn't be going back to the 1960s hippie movement type days where drugs were all just seen as a good thing, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I think we should recognize that drugs have an issue, and they lead to a lot of societal ills, particularly the harder drugs like methamphetamines, heroin, and the like.
Yeah, you need to tell Keith.
May I? Those people you described stopped a war. They stopped the Vietnam War. That ideology was something that was dominant. We actually were becoming a great country at that point. We were advocating for civil rights. And yes, it is a vice. And if somebody gets home in the evening and they want to have a glass of wine after work, or they want to have a beer, it's legal. You don't take it. And I haven't heard you say at all, this substance intrinsically, this chemical compound, as it is inherently, is wrong, as opposed to murder or robbery. When somebody has a problem with drugs or any kind of substance, and it rises to a level at which it impairs what they're doing and it's pathological, they need to get treatment. You don't make it legal. And finally, 2 points. Next to last, Portugal's had it legal for 20 years. They don't have any problems. And to talk about people who sell drugs, they got to get them from someplace. But to use the term pushers, I think you really ought to read current literature about marketing of drugs and how they're sold and everything, because I don't think pusher's been used since, Steppenwolf had that one song, Bill. William, that's about the last. But you're going to get it someplace. If any place, you can go to some place that sells used records, especially flea markets. And if they have double albums from the 1970s, I only know this anecdotally, people used to clean pot stems and seeds out using double albums. And so if you see a double album, like the White Album was very popular for that, just kind of see if there's any residue. And if you're hard up for getting a buzz on a Saturday afternoon, you might want to check that out.
Well, those seeds have value. Those are called landrace seeds. And if you got them, I know a collector who wants them.
Yeah. You guys are both dating yourselves on this, so but that's great. I'll tell you, this is I'm gonna let Jacob respond to that. I think that one is nice as Ashton is in sometimes. I mean, but we did have Spiro say that he loves the passion. So Jacob, I'll give you a second to do that. Then we're going to bid adieu for our special guest and thank him for being on tonight. And we're going to do the conspiracy theory segment. So go ahead. You got the last word, Jacob.
Okay, certainly. Thank you. Thank you, John. Well, I think when we're talking about condemning vices and such, I see like throughout society generally a very strong condemnation of cigarette smoking, for example, and rightfully so. You know, cigarette smoking is not a healthy thing, and it really should be condemned, and people should be discouraged from doing it. The problem that I see from the whole legalized drugs crowd is I don't see the same approach. I might be sympathetic to entertaining the idea of legalizing drugs from certain financial and practical standpoints, yes, if we would assure ourselves that drugs would be discouraged, just like how we tend to discourage cigarette smoking. I really think that drugs, like I said, have caused a lot of problems throughout society. 19th century China is just only one example, is just one example I can draw from. But I think the drug addiction and overuse of drugs is it just has caused a lot of societal ills, not only in our own society, but different societies throughout history. So if we're even going to talk about legalizing drugs, I think we do need to talk about addressing these societal problems that come with drug usage. You know, I wouldn't want to just legalize drugs and then have a society where everybody's encouraging people to use cocaine or to use heroin or to use methamphetamines. We need to have that. If we did potentially legalize drugs, we need to have the same approach with drugs as we do with cigarettes. Like, sure, it's legal, but it is highly, highly discouraged. We shouldn't be encouraging it, celebrating it, or even creating a whole culture around it.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up our discussion. Bill, I'm going to let you have some parting comments, and we do appreciate you for popping in here this evening and being our first official special guest on the Mouthwash Show. And Jacob sort of feels like Ashton did on the first show when we had several more conservatives than liberals, but I think he did a fine job, defending his position, and you guys gave him all he wanted. So, Bill, I appreciate you being here, and some parting words while we get ready for our conspiracy theory segment.
I love you. I thank you for having me on. It's a fabulous show. We got all these little windows here. Hi, Mark. I love you. Jacob, we agreed to disagree. John, always good to see you. Now, let's talk about marketing this show. If you're going to market the show and you call it Mouthwash, and you got a donkey and an elephant on it, I think you need to go to Dollar Tree, buy a bunch of mouthwash and relabel it with your logo and send it out to news media. So There you have a quick freebie.
Okay.
But it would work.
You are the promoter, and we forgot to show this. Mark, do you still have your Bill Levin action figure? I don't know if it's an action figure, but put that up there, Mark, if you have it. Everybody needs one. I have one too, Bill, but I can't find it. We're in the process of moving and all that. So
I got them. If you need one, I got them. Trust me. If I get one,
Bill Levin, and he'll take care of that. But he is a good promoter, and I love that idea. And we are going to get some mouthwash bottles and send them to certain media outlets that probably could use the mouthwash, right? Okay. So with that, we're going to go to our break here, and we are going to get our tinfoil hats on, and we're going to have this. So Thanks, Bill, and we'll catch you later.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, y'all, it's time for the conspiracy theory, so you better get your tinfoil hat out and let's see what's going on this week.
I need to make that promo a little longer so I can get my hat. So I modified the old colander and made it total tinfoil because I think some stuff was getting through there before. And I see we got Indiana tinfoil there as Mark and Jacob, the shalom. Since Mark's our guest, let's start with his conspiracy theory first. And then we'll go to Jacob's, and then I actually got some pictures for my conspiracy theory. So go ahead, Mark. Tell us what you got for your conspiracy theory.
We don't go high tech on this. In the late 1960s, several CEOs of large corporations agreed to try to set up a program whereby corporations would gain a road to personhood. And then, once they did that, via strategic placements of people in the federal judiciary, they could use media and social media that they are already designing at that time to get people to believe that they could have constitutional convention. And then at that point, we would, with our brothers in Russia and China, and if Vladimir Putin is listening right now, Yabat Vayu. But we knew that if we had the convention, then we could get anything we wanted, and that's where we're going.
So that one's been around for a while, hasn't it? But it's still probably active. So Jacob, what do you have for us?
Well, I got a conspiracy theory that's very relevant to millions of people across the United States right now because you guys are living through it right now. And that is the whole fact that the government is actually manipulating the clouds to cause this massive amounts of snow we're having right now. All the big time, corporate CEOs in conjunction with the federal government are manipulating everything and causing massive snowfall to inflict pain on all of us peasants here that have to deal with shoveling our driveways and slipping on the roads and trying to get to work in one piece without destroying our cars. So it's a horrible thing.
You're up there, you get the lake effect snow. And I also heard part of this conspiracy theory was there's actually a government submarine out there that's making extra waves so that there's more moisture in there so that you even get more snow. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I heard. So, that's another theory that is probably true, but we don't know. So as you read the bottom here, these conspiracy theories are for entertainment purposes only. So now on to mine, and I said I got
pictures. For investment purposes. They're for investment purposes.
Yeah, in your case, it's investment. I should have bought that Facebook stock 20 years ago. Dang it. So here you go. Here's my conspiracy theory. So here you have Mitch McConnell, and notice in his hand, he has a pen. That's significant. Remember that. And then here we have Nancy Pelosi, and she has a pen. Okay, now here, I'm going to tie it all together. And here is Darth Vader. You see, he has a lightsaber. Now, this is pretty much the same thing as a pen. And you know how I know this is a true conspiracy is because have you ever seen Darth Vader, Mitch McConnell, and Nancy Pelosi in the same room at the same time? I rest my case. So, Jake, what are you shaking your head for? It's true.
No, I'm impressed, John. There's no way I can argue against it. That's
okay. Yeah, I'm going to say that because, my attorney's on the other side over here. He tie a knot in your tail for disagreeing with that. So with that said, this is another wrap for, I thought was a wonderful Mouthwash show. And we got some marketing tips. We got some investment tips. We got a weather report. And a crazy Darth Vader conspiracy. Where else can you find that all in one show? So tune in next week for the Mouthwash Show, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And join us for next week, see what our topics are, and maybe we'll have another special guest. And Mark, thanks so much for stepping in, and the Spock sign to you too as well. So
it was a pleasure, Eric. Thank you so much for the lively debate.
Yes, and it was a good time. So thanks a lot, everybody. See you next week.